Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Martha Puentes, the Program Manager for Executive Education, Corporate Partnerships, and Lifelong Learning here at the W.P. Carey Business School. I will be your host for today's webinar, W.P. Carey LiveCast, AI, and the New Era of Digital Marketing. And now, let me introduce our wonderful experts joining me today to discuss how AI is transforming the digital space. Cristine Vieira is a marketing leader and entrepreneur. She co-founded Find Your Influence, and helped pioneer influencer marketing and has led marketing roles at NortonLifeLock and Avnet. Today, she advises startups, serves on national boards, and continues to drive innovation at the intersection of marketing and technology. Joining her is Bret Giles. Bret teaches digital marketing and innovation here at ASU and co-founded Audacious Studios, a marketing incubator. With over 30 years of experience in both B2B and B2C, he's been recognized nationally as Arizona's Small Business Person of the Year. Please join me in welcoming Cristine and Bret to today's webinar. Cristine and Bret, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining in today. First off, we just want to thank you for all of the questions that you submitted previously. I don't know, there were a lot of them. There were 60, 70, 80 questions, so many questions from which to kind of go through. So we went through and tried to create a flow that seemed reasonable to try to address at least as many of those questions as we possibly could. And obviously we'll address some questions at the end as well. But given that we only have an hour and we probably have about 10 hours worth of questions, maybe, we're going to get going so we can get as many of these as we possibly can. So we're first going to talk about like how do we separate kind of this hype of AI from what reality of what things are looking like today. So to that, I'm going to be directing like first question to you, Cristine, which is from your perspective, what is the single most important tangible impact that AI and or marketing automation are having on the marketing landscape right now?
Yeah, good question. So today, from a marketing perspective, if you look at how you can use AI and where it's really making a difference, it's production, it's efficiency, and really looking at the data so that marketers have the ability to test, learn, and optimize. I mean, if you look at marketing for the last 10, 15 years, it's all been about optimization and A/B testing, but it's the first time where marketers can truly look at data, learn from that data, and optimize almost real time. Using a lot of these generative AI tools that, you might have used like HubSpot, like GA, that they have now introduced a lot of AI tools so that you can really look at the data and understand the data and make decisions. And then from a production standpoint, I'd say creation of content, images, videos. I mean, just in the last year, tools have gotten so much better at understanding a brand's voice, understanding what you're trying to get across and really helping you create better content so that then you can interact with your clients in a more transparent, authentic way that's still in the brand's voice.
Yeah. So would you agree with the idea then that since we're kind of in this early stage that it's good to get in early, quote unquote early, and to kind of just test and learn. And then based on what you know from those learnings to be able to adapt to that. It's like, to me, it kind of seems like if you're going to do something and you succeed, that's fantastic. If you're going to do something and you fail, that's probably the next best thing as opposed to maybe
100%.
doing nothing at all, right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, you can learn so much from this. The other really neat thing is, like we talked about A/B testing. When you were A/B testing, let's say 10, 15 years ago, I mean, it was months for you to really understand the data. You've changed your website. You have two versions of that website. Today, you can test, within a couple of weeks, and you have a really good understanding of what's working, what's not working, or like you said, maybe something failed or your analytics have dropped. Okay, well, now you know what you need to change. That took months for marketers in the past, and today you can make those decisions pretty quickly.
Yeah. So if you can't tell, I have like quite a bit of gray hair. So that takes us back to the fact that I was around during the dawn of the internet, whatever we want to call that, the late 90s, maybe the early 2000s. I was around for when e-commerce came into play, around for obviously when social media came into play. How do you think about the rise of AI or the use of AI relative to those eras within the digital marketing timeframe?
Yep. I mean, we're looking, 15, 20 years. There's just been a lot of change, and a lot of good change for marketers. But I'd say, like, if we're looking for similarities, with internet, it gave us, access to information, access to companies that we, maybe didn't have access to. With social media, it gave us collaboration and that ability to not just hear what the brands have to say, but now you're interacting with the brands, you're interacting with creators. And I think with AI, it gives us a lot of the same tools and maybe tactics that we were using, but at scale, right? It's about, I think, acceleration. And it's moving so fast. And all of us are seeing that. But it really gives you the ability to test social media, test, your website and SEO at a level that we weren't seeing in the past. I think the biggest difference is how fast it's moving.
Yeah.
So, back in the day, I actually led one of the companies I worked for with their social media strategy. And it took companies a couple of years to embrace social, decide whether it was something that was going away and that they needed to interact with. And then ultimately, they built their brand presence. We don't have that today. Like, this is moving so fast. And it's just one of those things that you're going to have to adapt to and develop skills for. I don't think you have the same amount of time that you had with, social media and some of these other tactics.
One of the interesting things that as you bring that up, a company that I work for, in fact, the reason that I actually got into digital marketing in the first place is a company I work for. They put me in charge of doing marketing for their e-commerce initiative. And e-commerce back then, this would have been in the late 90s, was basically non-existent. And they were betting on the fact that this thing was going to actually materialize and do something. So it was a very exciting time from my perspective, at least. What ended up happening, though, is they stopped. They decided that the bet wasn't worth it and that this e-commerce idea wasn't going to really go anywhere in the long term, which of course, as we all know now, we can look back and we can laugh at them. But at the time, you didn't know what was going to happen. So AI, if you had to take a guess here, is this, maybe we're in, I don't know, the famous trough of disillusionment where it's like maybe things aren't happening exactly as we thought they were going to happen and things aren't quite as productive as we thought they might be. But obviously, as it comes out the other end to where we can really get more productive, are you betting on AI from a marketing perspective?
100%. It's funny, there was a study that just came out a week or two ago by Social Media Examiner, and they said that this year, over 60% of marketers are using AI. And I think that's different from maybe other teams, but marketers in general have embraced it. If you asked the same question last year, it was in the 30s. And so I think AI is going to live behind the scenes, especially from a marketing perspective, and you're going to learn how to really hone those skills so that it helps you with your day-to-day.
Yep. I want to look at there was a state of AI in business. This is a 2025 study, and they looked at 300 enterprise AI deployments. So they were looking at how effectively was AI deployed at an enterprise level, and basically said that only 5% actually drove any sort of revenue growth. Now, we don't know for a fact that was even the intent of the study in the first place, but nonetheless, they said it wasn't the quality of the AI, but it was an issue with the learning gap. So the tools weren't taught to the people that needed to understand them, and there was no real workflow put in place within the organization to be able to adapt to the change. So a little bit of a potential flaw there, right? And maybe a reason why a lot of those failed. But what do you think is the biggest misconception that you see marketing leaders have today in terms of implementing technology, specifically technologies that have AI first or AI embedded in them?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple of misconceptions. One, from a marketing perspective, you're hearing a lot about, the data and this concept of hyper personalization. And, with AI, now you magically have access to a lot of this information. Um, I feel like it's getting there, and depending on your business, if you have a lot of first party data, you do actually have the ability to hyper personalize an experience for that customer. But the reality is, like, if you're a direct to consumer company, there's still a lot of data that AI doesn't have access to. And when you're trying to market to folks, knowing that I think Gartner said 80% of data is still behind API walls and, paywalls or privacy. So how do you effectively market knowing that you don't have access to a lot of the data that you need, and neither does AI? So it's really collecting that first party data, understanding the limitations of AI today and how you can grow from that. And then the other piece is that you're hearing a lot of folks say that, AI replaces strategy, for example, or you can just set it and forget it. And I think that that's something that it doesn't exist today. Um, AI is a strategy partner. You can use it as a strategy partner. They're, a co-pilot. Um, but it's really understanding, you're setting that strategy. Um, you're using it to really help you with tasks and efficiency. But you're owning and managing that
Yeah.
strategy for AI.
Yep. I actually I went in and going back to that Gartner study, I went into Gemini because I like, why not? I went to Gemini and I asked it, like, how much of the information that's out there in the world do you actually have access to? And of course, it had this very long, convoluted answer. But when it got down to the end of the answer, it said, I have access to what it calls the surface web.
Yeah.
And it identified the surface web as less than 5% of all information that's actually out there. So
Exactly.
there's a lot of information that it does not have access to, and a lot of value that, as because of that, a human could actually bring to the
100%.
table for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and to this point, there was a Stanford study that was done that I want to make sure I get all this information right. It found that AI usage and AI models reduced time for a task to get done from 90 minutes to 30 minutes. And of course, the fact that we're able to get something done per se in a third the time, that means one of two things, that our workers are able to be way more productive, and they can focus more upstream. They can do things that are more important as opposed to those rote tasks. It also means to maybe other people, I now can hire a third of the people that I was able to hire before, which of course is a little bit scary for us from a marketer's perspective. And if you look at people like the head of Walmart and the head of Accenture, they're both kind of on this bandwagon of there's no particular reason for me to hire many more people. I don't really need that. So do you see marketing roles being replaced by AI, being augmented by AI? How do you see the future of marketing roles within an AI world?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a believer that it's really augmenting. And there's this opportunity for us to really upskill our workers and, at ASU, really making sure that our students are well equipped, knowing that AI is, part of their future as a marketer, if that's what they're pursuing. So it's really, what are the skills that I need in order to use AI effectively so that it's making, my day-to-day that much more efficient. Like I can see marketing teams even increasing. If you can show that ROI and that output, and it's from a performance standpoint, we're actually performing at higher levels because of AI, then, that kind of proves what you need it to prove. Just making sure that your team is equipped with how to use AI and where it can help them with their day-to-day.
When it's kind of, again, a lot of gray hair, whatever. When I graduated college, I went to work for an ad agency, and my first role was rote tasks. Now, there was obviously no AI then or anything, but my job was to go and find all the magazines of everywhere that this particular marketer had advertised, use an X-Acto knife, cut them out, put them onto foam core, and show that we had proof of performance for all this stuff. So it was a rote task that anybody could potentially do. And there was a LinkedIn study that kind of goes along with this that said that about 30% of all these tasks are just that. They're tasks that really are easily accomplished in some other way. So of course the question then becomes like, okay, if AI can really do most of those tasks, those 30%, then what are the 70% that are kind of left, or how do I upskill myself, so to speak, so I make sure that I'm doing those sorts of tasks? Do you have any thoughts on either one, maybe some of the skills that might be more like, be careful, like these skills are easily handled by AI, or ones that you think like, these are ones that they're pretty safe for the time being? Because I think what we're both saying is that it's more the the skills that are going to get replaced, less the jobs. It's like it's not so much not like the whole job is going away, just that skills within the job might be going away.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, I mean, I think what you need to do, like if you're a marketer today, looking at your day to day and what are repeatable low level tasks that you can today start using AI for. So, scheduling is a good example. Or back in the day, like you mentioned, I was doing marketing for a couple of organizations and I spent a lot of time changing subject lines, right, for emails or changing social media posts so that I have a couple of examples where I could A/B test them. Well, those are things that AI today does a really good job at. If you give it a really good subject line, or let's say a couple that have worked for the business today, they can give you, 10 more, 20 more that you can now use, test, and quickly optimize for, right? So now that's given you a lot of efficiency that you might have not had prior to AI. From a skills perspective, I believe that teams are going to be more, built of creatives, more strategics, and then maybe these AI marketing specialists that are looking at overall AI strategy and how to incorporate marketing, AI strategy into the groups. But just, I'd say maybe more generalists.
Yeah. When I talk, when I'm thinking about things from a classroom perspective, I think about the fact that you mentioned creatives, this idea of creative thinking or being able to come up with lots of ideas, and maybe AI helps in building out lots of ideas. And then we kind of bring those ideas down to the ones that are actually the ones that we really want to go with. Like these are the core ideas. So that converge and then the diverge and then converge come down to just a few ideas from a creative thinking perspective. To me, kind of seems like an area where it's like, okay, I can use AI to help me build out this treasure trove of all kinds of ideas. Maybe there's some interesting ones in there. Then I could kind of say, not so interested in that one. And it's kind of the humans now that are going through and saying like, using their creative thinking skills or critical thinking skills, trying to understand the customer and saying like, no, these are the ones that we actually really need to pursue, or this is the one that we need to pursue. Does that resonate?
It absolutely does. And I read recently that, like as a student or as a marketer, companies are focused on a lot more so today, more of the soft skills. So we're saying like critical thinking, like you said, being able to adapt with change. Because I mean, we've seen a significant amount of change just in the last 24 months. But think of that 3 to 5 years from now. Communication skills and collaboration. Because you're going to really have to understand how your team is using AI today and how can we collaborate so that we as a team are more efficient and hit, company goals.
It's all those C's: collaboration, critical thinking, maybe
Communication.
contextual thinking, creativity. It's all the C's. You have to really be focused on the C's. I'm going to write that down. The five C's of marketing in the future. I don't know. Okay. So let's talk about maybe the difference between the way you view AI and the way you view marketing automation. Because marketing automation and marketing automation platforms like HubSpot and such, they've been around for a very long time. So what makes this new wave of generative AI different or maybe more compelling from a marketer's perspective?
Yeah. So again, like marketing automation's been around for years. It's really helped marketing organizations understand, A/B test, optimize. A lot of it though was still manual, right? So you're building those workflows. I'll use email as a really good example. With email, marketing automation was, after somebody registers, 24 hours later, please send XYZ email. Now, they've been a customer for 30 days. Please send this. Change the subject line to, XYZ. With AI and with a lot of these models, you can do a lot of that real time.
Yeah.
So it's, what's the best subject line for this specific client? How can I engage with this client knowing that they came in through this channel? What are 10 content pieces that I should be adding to that flow or to that funnel? That's all stuff that's working almost real time for a lot of the marketers, whereas marketing automation, it goes back to, it took a lot of time and it took, probably 3 to 6 months for you to understand that workflow that you built. Is it working?
Yeah.
Are there changes that I need to make? That's just having a lot faster.
Yeah. Marketing automation seems, and forgive me to all the marketing automation platforms out there, but it's a little bit more execution focused really than AI is more of your pal that's going to help you be able to use your marketing automation platforms more effectively in the long run.
Well, and the really neat thing is like you brought HubSpot up. I mean, they've added a ton of AI
Yeah,
tools,
yeah.
right? And so a lot of the tools that marketers have been using for years are now adding these AI tools that'll make their lives, a lot easier. With HubSpot, I think they're looking at leads and they have the ability to categorize those leads real time based on AI, so that you have a really clear understanding of the leads that are coming in, which ones are going to stick, what you have to do to really lead them through that funnel. I mean, it's a lot faster, and they have AI tools too.
Yep. So when we think about, marketing automation, that tends to be kind of a behind the scenes sort of a thing. And now let's move maybe out to something that a consumer can actually see. How do you think consumers perceive AI right now, specifically AI that might be being used by brands? Are they thinking that it's favorable? Are they thinking it's unfavorable? Like, what's the general sentiment out there?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's mixed.
Yeah.
So in general, right, consumers want to um, make sure that they have the support they need from brands or from companies. And so, I mean, the great news is AI offers chatbots where it's 24 hours a day. You now can ask questions, and those questions are answered real time. What customers don't like is maybe a lack of transparency. So they don't want to be talking to a chatbot that's 100% AI and not know that it's AI.
Yeah.
So you need to be transparent as a brand. They also want to know that they'll ultimately reach someone, a human. So that chatbot is there to really help answer questions maybe when, someone's not available, or it just gives them the ability to ask right away. But can I ultimately reach a customer support specialist that can
Yeah.
help me? I think it's a combination of the two. There's always this human element, this human oversight that consumers expect.
Yeah.
But if they know that AI is there and you're being transparent as a brand with consumers, then that goes a long way.
Yeah. And if I spoke a different language, which of course I don't, I'm one of those horrible people that only can speak English. But if I were to speak a different language, that's really nice too, right? Because the chatbot, in theory, if it's AI, would be able to understand my language and be able to adapt. Yeah. Whereas if it's just a human, that's like me. Guess what? You're going to kind of be stuck with maybe not getting the answers you want.
Yeah.
I like what you said as it relates to transparency, authenticity, the idea of brands kind of being forthright about how they use AI. For those of you that aren't in Arizona, we've been having a lot of rain lately, which is something that we don't say in Arizona very often. We've been having a lot. And so I've noticed like on TikTok that there's all these Sora generated videos of like people they're like in a kayak and they're paddling down the river or what have you. And clearly our streets are not that flooded, but we do have puddles and pretty good sized puddles. But it's very clear, that this is being generated by AI. Do you think that transparency or that authenticity, like as a brand, like as opposed to just kind of faking it, you get some phone call that seems like it's something important, but in actuality, it's just some AI generated thing that's talking to you? And do you think that transparency is important, that authenticity is important?
100%. I mean, I come from that social,
Yeah.
I know that you do too, creator space, where it's all about connecting authentically with your audience and making sure that you're transparent. And even if you look at, some of the large organizations, Google, Salesforce, they've built these AI statements.
Yep.
And if you read through them, they all talk about the same things, which is how do I use AI? How do I position it with my employees? And how do I be transparent with my consumers and collaborate with these tools?
Yep.
Transparency is key if you're going to use AI, and your consumers can see through it.
Yep.
If you're not transparent, but you're creating all of these videos that are 100% AI, at some point they'll understand that, and there will be backlash to that. So you might as well just be transparent about it, and they can interact with it knowing that that's what they're looking at.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. So we, as it relates to automating tasks, as it relates to helping with content and such, I feel like we talk quite a bit about AI kind of being in that downstream part of marketing, like how it can help when we're executing on a project, when we want to test different ABs or something like that. What about on the more upstream side? So now we're talking about like marketing strategy, go-to-market strategy, competitive analysis, all the things that make us decide whether or not we're going to pursue a product or not pursue a product, or if we're going to add a brand extension or product extension, all those things. Do you see AI having a role in there? And if so, what might that role look like?
In more of a strategic role?
Yeah, a strategic role.
Absolutely. So I think, and we mentioned a little bit before, using AI as more of a co-pilot, as a strategy partner. I read somewhere, make sure you're using AI like the smartest person on your team,
Yeah.
right? So how do you go back and continue to ask questions or understand and use it for more of that marketing research? So I saw CMOs are creating prompts for their day-to-day where they're prompting, ChatGPT or whatever channel that you're using. What are the top 3 things that companies that compete with me are doing this week? So you can use it for really a lot of that market research for that competitive advantage. So you have a really clear understanding of your market, of things that are being done today and how you can address them. And you can do that, every Monday. Start with a couple of prompts so that when you're jumping into a lot of those team meetings, you have a clear understanding of the market, of what's being done, and maybe, some top things that you should be focusing your team on.
And that's reasonable, even if you're a very small business. I mean,
Right.
if I run a restaurant down the street or something, and I want to kind of understand what the lay of the land looks like in my area, it would be easy for it to supply that to me. I love the idea of like I don't know what you want to call it, a weekly briefing, or I mean, I suppose you could do that daily if you really wanted to, right?
Yeah.
Just have it tell you what's going on in the world,
100%.
as opposed to Google News or something like that, or
Yeah.
Apple News.
What I think is really neat actually is that it really has even the playing field a bit,
Yeah.
right? So if you look at modeling and this concept of LLMs and modeling for companies, let's say 5-10 years ago, it was very resource extensive, right? And so some of that the small businesses or the startups didn't have access to
Yep.
a lot of these resources or team members that they needed to really model out the data. And I feel like that's been a big change here in the last year or
Yeah.
two, is it's even that playing field, and a small business could absolutely learn, prompting
Yep.
and stay ahead of their competitors. And a lot of times, because you're a small business, you can be more flexible to change and work faster and use some of these AI tools, whereas a larger organization is having to adapt and change processes that maybe they've had for the last 10-20 years.
Yeah.
So it can be a lot slower.
This was a question that we received in many different contexts or many different ways, but basically it talks about, as marketers, we are custodians of the brand, we're custodians of data. We have all this customer data and other data as well. And how do we make sure that we handle that ethically, specifically in an era of AI? How do we make sure that we have guardrails in place to preserve the integrity of the data and to make sure that our customers' data is actually safe and secure and treated in a way that would be respectful, and that they would be like, yeah, I like this brand because they're actually taking care of me. So what thoughts that we haven't already addressed might you have around that? I know we've talked about a few.
Yeah. Um, I think it just always has to be in that background. Understanding, the limitation in the data is a big one, which we already talked about. Understanding what data you have available to you today, what data is available for clients that you have today that you're comfortable using AI for, making sure you're building that framework for your company and for your employees. How do I use AI today? What are prompts or maybe a prompt library you can provide to your team so that they have a really clear understanding of how to use it, how not to use it, and then always audit and test the data. There's a lot of companies that do a good job of this, but there's tools that you can actually purchase or subscribe to that help with some of that, the guardrails that you mentioned, so that if you have content output from AI, you're looking at it, making sure there's no bias, you're being fair with the data, and that again, you're being transparent and accountable.
So if I'm like let's say maybe I'm in healthcare marketing or what have you, like how do I make sure that employees don't accidentally start teaching a model about information that's personally identifiable or that somehow is not something that should be out there? I mean, because there's obviously this enterprise level model that maybe all the stuff sits within the enterprise and it never gets outside the company. But an employee could just be not realizing that they're doing anything wrong and go out to ChatGPT or to Gemini or something and
Yeah.
put information in there that's like, this is not information that is not readily available from a public perspective. How do you try to manage that?
Yeah. And I think a lot of this that we've been talking about is where it's critical to build that framework. Let's say a year or 2 years ago, a lot of people were using AI. Companies just weren't training their team on how to use AI within the business, right? So now it's gotten to a point where legal needs to be involved at all of the businesses, and they need to build that framework so that employees understand what can I do and what can I do. And especially you brought out healthcare. I mean, there are AI companies or AI models that are purely for healthcare, so that you're following HIPAA and some of these compliance standards that other maybe larger models don't solve for.
Yeah.
So your employees have to have a really clear understanding of how to use it and how not to use it, and what customer data you don't want to provide.
This is it's kind of a scary area, right? Because it's hard to do that, especially now we go to the larger businesses versus the smaller businesses.
Right.
And this is where maybe it gets a little unfair, quote unquote, in a way, because the larger businesses can say, hey, we have this enterprise version and it's kind of a walled garden and no one can, this is safe to use kind of a thing. And then you have a smaller business and they don't have all the rigor behind how you use this stuff. And so it can get pretty scary when all of a sudden you figure out that someone has released, it might not be information about your customers, but it might be confidential information about an upcoming product release or who knows what, that was unintentional, but it's still out there. And now in theory, the model can learn from that and it can be taught from that, which is a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah. It's 100% nerve-wracking. I mean, I think there are some guardrails, right? Like you can decide to turn on or off, and train that model. I think, for businesses, it's very important to really look at those tools. Make sure you're getting, the paid tools if you're using free.
Yeah.
Have a clear understanding of what you're providing
Yeah.
AI, so that you're not providing any PII, anything that's confidential within your business. If you have the opportunity to build models internally so that it is, like you said, a walled garden, and your proprietary information is within that business,
Yeah.
and you're not using some of these language models and accidentally providing confidential information.
Yeah. So I'm going back to when I was talking about those videos, Sora, with the people in the kayaks going down the roads. They all tended to look pretty similar. I'm sure, I don't know what that people were typing in to get that output, but they were prompting something to get that to happen.
Yeah.
That could be happening in theory to brands as well. How do brands manage an era where if a lot of brands start to use AI for content, that content just starts to become, generic. It starts to look like anything else. What do we do to make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah. And so this is where branding and marketing is so crucial and important for businesses. You need to understand your brand, what your voice is to customers, have a clear understanding of what's working, what's not working, what's resonating with your clients, so that when you're prompting AI, you're prompting it with that information in mind and getting very specific. I know that we jump into a bit of the concept around work slop and, getting a lot of this generic data out. It's really about being very specific with what you're looking for from AI.
Yeah.
And you can get very specific. Like I've seen teams where they use, Midjourney for imagery and ChatGPT for the prompts. And you can get as specific as, I want an image with this size lens and this size picture and this, specific color. Like that's how you can use AI to get very specific on branding.
Yeah.
And use your brand voice that you've already built and honed. So that you keep that, and it's not this generic content. It's really something that's proprietary in your brand.
And I've noticed that, whatever we want to call them, users that don't use it with particular frequency, they tend to be starting over from the get-go. So like they'll tell it something over and over and over again, as opposed to using tools that sit within most of these platforms to where you can give it whatever we want to call it, guidelines. You can tell it who it is or who you are or what the company is, and give it information about the company, values of the company, the company's typical voice, tone, and style, and all those things can actually be part of that, so that when it's actually creating some sort of an output, it already has that information embedded in, and you're not just continually re-spinning the wheel.
The same things. Yeah.
Over and over.
I mean, it is becoming, a skill, an art.
Yeah.
How do you prompt AI with just the right information so that it's giving you exactly what you're looking for, and then auditing that information, right? So, I mean, especially if you're looking at facts, like you're building content and there's just a lot of facts within that. Well, make sure that you're looking at that information and you have teams and human oversight so that you're really evaluating the content that you're getting back.
have it's a quick little assignment in class. One of the things I have students do is go in and use the AI, so use ChatGPT in this instance to actually figure out the prompt. So it's like you're going to go through and you're going to create this prompt, but your assignment is to create a prompt, not to show me the answer to the prompt, it's just to create a prompt. So you have to keep asking it, have it ask you questions so it can build the best possible prompt. And it's always amazing by the end of that exercise, it's like, oh my goodness, the prompt is pretty specific, like you mentioned, as opposed to, I need a 2-page this, and then guess what? It doesn't even give you 2 pages. It really doesn't do anything that it's supposed to be doing. It's like, oh, well, life goes on. Yeah. So from a personal perspective, what have you seen that brands have done that within an AI perspective that might have worked really well? It could be ad campaign. It could be a way that they use AI for research, whatever. What are some things that you've seen that's like, that was kind of compelling, kind of interesting?
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to how can I be transparent when using AI? I think in general, most marketers today are using AI behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So, how do I get the best content so that I'm really connecting with my audience in a way that's meaningful to them? And then you have, the Nikes and the Sephoras of the world that have the ability to really use AI creatively. So like we've all seen commercials, like Nike had a great commercial with Serena Williams where she was playing herself. Very transparent, playful, creative. They're not trying to say this is Serena Williams. No, this is, an AI version of Serena and this is her and they're playing together. Very, very fun, very transparent. They've done a good job of doing that. I think we've all also read the examples of, AI videos that were 100% AI and there was backlash because they weren't transparent about it. They didn't know that that's what they were interacting with. You also see Sephora, for example, they've created tools so that you can see and use products almost online. That's a really neat way to use AI to really showcase the products that you have available to you. So how do you use it in a way where it's meaningful to customers, it's helpful and transparent?
Yep. I've noticed that another interesting way that brands are using it is with like what we're kind of calling like synthetic research, where they tell AI they become the persona, the AI becomes the persona, and then the brand talks to the persona AI as if it is that, and then they learn without having to go out and do heavy market research. Ultimately, they go out and do the market research, but they've already learn before they're actually spending the energy, the money, and everything to do that. They've learned that, hey, if we're introducing this sort of a product, we need to think about this, we need to think about that before they ever even get there, because the synthetic, persona is telling them, it's like, I'm not interested in that.
And think of that, right? Like 5-10 years ago, it took us months to develop personas, right? And so now you know of personas, right? As a marketer that exists. How can you glean from that? How can you get more information so that now your marketing is already built for those specific personas? I mean, it's made it so much faster.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to the workforce now and spend a little bit of time on the workforce. And I know, of course, we've not made it nearly as far as we were hoping to make it, but hey, we're marketers. We like to talk. What can we do here? But performance metrics. So I noticed that increasingly, whether it be a brand or an agency, are starting to include in their performance metrics questions about use of AI. How effectively are you integrating AI into your everyday job responsibilities? Are you using AI maybe prior to contacting a human or having a human spend time on it? Like, are you looking at ways to try to be smart about how you automate certain tasks? Are you seeing this? What do you see around? Do you think this is like a overall probably a good idea, maybe not so good of idea? What do you think about that?
For teams to be evaluating.
Yeah, and having at least as a percent of their, like let's say, 10% of your overall performance is being judged against how effectively you're using AI to make your job more efficient and effective.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to questions in the past on, skills or tools that you had. So SEO, are you familiar with SEO? Are you familiar with such and such social media tools? I think it's just a natural evolution of marketing and business. How are you using AI to solve X, Y, and Z problems? So I think it's a regular evolution and something that we're probably going to see more so. But for businesses, I think they need to also ask themselves, like, how am I helping my employees? How am I upskilling my employees, knowing that AI is going to be, part of business in the future? How can I help them and train them?
So, which goes to there's a quote from the CEO of Accenture. She says, "We are investing in upskilling our reinventors, which is our primary strategy." But then she also said, "Exiting people on a compressed timeline for whom reskilling isn't a viable path." And I'm not exactly sure what that means, but how do we go about reskilling, quote unquote, or upskilling a workforce that we go back to that LinkedIn thing where 30% of the job is kind of these rote tasks. How do we get people to where they're able to take on other responsibility that's less AI vulnerable?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first step is to really embrace AI as a tool for companies.
At like the highest level, probably, right?
At the high level. Yeah, not just for marketing, but just in general. Let's embrace these tools. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So, as a company, if you're embracing the tools, then let's make sure that you're building those frameworks. The teams have a good understanding of what they can and can't do. And then you have those early adopters. So how do I allow them to be early adopters and champions for AI within the teams? So building that.
So I'm going to go on to a Procter and Gamble study here, and it found that it was an interesting study. 776 professionals. It found that they produced solutions at a quality. So one person produced work at a quality level comparable to a two-person team. So AI wasn't just moving the needle more quickly; it was actually creating more quality results. So, do you think, like, how does upskilling? I suppose for sure upskilling must fit into that. There must be a way for us as business owners and stuff to be responsible to make sure that people understand what this new role looks like and make sure that they have the capabilities necessary for the new skills, so that we're not just wholesale getting rid of roles or jobs, but we're just upskilling people into new skills.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it gives teams and individuals the ability to be more strategic, right? Like if you're giving AI some of these lower level repeatable tasks, that means that you now have more time to be creative, to be strategic. Your limitation with AI is how creative you can be.
Yeah.
Right. So now I can be creative with my prompts. I can be creative with the content that I'm looking to build for clients, for audience members. How can I truly connect with my audience? Those are questions that you might not have had time to answer because you were scheduling posts, because you're trying to create, A/B test subject lines. So it's really elevated that task force. And then for businesses, it's, how do I continue to teach them? How do I use those, early adopters as champions within each of the teams, and then giving them the ability to do workshops. And there's so much training out there that's available.
Yeah.
We're all just trying to catch up, right? It's all happened within the last couple of years. So let's collaborate and learn together so that we're upskilling our teams.
I love the idea of finding influencers within the environment. And I know Martha has some questions for us, but I'm just going to ask one quick one since it's kind of tied to that, which has to do with this idea of work slop. And this is this new term that AI is creating, work slop, so to speak. And do you think that it seems like that has a lot to do with this lack of skill? It's like, if I don't know what to put in and how to do it effectively, then I'm probably going to get some sloppy stuff on the backside. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you have to spend the time understanding your brand, understanding your voice, having a clear understanding of your value proposition so that when you're using AI, you're being very specific with those prompts. And you're going to get work slop if you're not being specific with your questions, right? And that's true for all of this. But I mean, with AI, you see it clearly. And I think all of us have used it and then gotten back responses where you're like, well, I didn't know where that come from. Or, maybe that stat isn't exactly accurate or correct. And that happens when you're just not specific with your questions and with the data that is provided.
Maybe it really just comes back to what I would have to look at in class too, is like, if I get bad output back, then it's probably as a business leader, I'm probably not doing my job, because if employees are getting slop back, it's probably because they don't really know what they need to be doing to be more effective in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Martha, you're up. What do you have for us?
Thanks so much. That was such a fantastic conversation. I'm so excited to be in the room with Cristine and Bret, just so we can hear some of their wonderful feedback and their expertise on all of this with digital marketing. So there has been several questions that have come in. So let's go ahead and go to the actual ones that have come in live first. I do have some that have come in live, and it ties into a lot of what we were recently talking about with in regards to the SEO. So let me give you this one. The first question that has come through is, do you think in the future companies will employ something similar to SEO found on search sites, and will the AI platform have something similar to get their business more visible to the consumer? For instance, if someone asks something related to the law, then the AI platform can give them the names of the best law firm in town.
Yeah, great question. And that's actually happening today.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the good news is like SEO is probably one of those areas within marketing that's changed the most, and that you really do have to adapt
Yeah.
very quickly. But the good news is that you can even use ChatGPT, Claude, whatever product you're using today to help you with SEO from a generative AI perspective, so that you're visible to clients. And it's really making sure those questions are within the content, and making those changes, releasing a lot more content, which is something that marketers have done. We've gotten used to doing that over the last few years. So continuing with that, but keeping in mind that, a lot of folks are finding companies that they want to work with, or, brands through AI or through social. So how do you change that content just a bit?
While the world is definitely changing, and we see that there's definitely people moving toward AI to ask questions and to try to find information or discover information. Over half of all discovery is still done via Google and search. So SEO is still important, but there's like
Very
this
relevant,
new thing called like GEO, I think is what
yeah.
they're actually calling it. There's also AIO, but I think we're really focused in here on GEO, and GEO is generative engine optimization. And how do I optimize for this one little result that's going to come back and make sure that I'm one of those sources that sit over there so that I look important. And if you think about like how Mayo Clinic did it in the past, like if I had any sort of a symptom and I go look up the symptom, like they always came up in those search results. And now it's like they've got to do the same thing, but they got to do it when I ask the question in ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that. What do I get back, and is it from them? And I think increasingly consumers are aware of the fact that they're not just taking that information for gospel, and they're actually looking at what those sources are now that those sources are being made more readily available. So it's even more important. There is at least a current way of thinking that says if we put some sort of structure around our content, that we're more likely to show up. Excuse me. So there's a thing called schema. And if you really are going to get technical about this, if you want to look into schema.org, you could find information on how to set things up so that you're using schema properly, and that might help you get better GEO. But no one has the magic. There is no magic.
There's no magic, yeah. And it's just probably in the last 6 to 12 months where you've seen, ChatGPT, for example, recommending brands or companies within that content. That's a fairly new concept. So just like SEO was new, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and you've had to adapt that content, it's going to be the same thing here.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to figure out how to get your brand visible within some of these models.
Really interesting on that note to me is that this just came out. This was at the OpenAI developer conference. One thing you could do is you could look at kind of developer conferences and hear what comes out of the developer conference, because it's going to lead ultimately to something from a marketing perspective
100%.
down the road. And what they were talking about there is that websites are going to dramatically change. And that's kind of an interesting thing. So as a lot more of our searches become 0-click searches where no one's actually going to being sent off to a website, what does the website actually do? And then once someone's on the website, how does it act more like an AI-enabled helper, so that instead of me having to figure out how to navigate around it, it is giving me answers based on what it knows that I need, which is kind of exciting if I really think about it. Like, I go to this site and it's like, ooh, look, now it's just, it knows that I'm interested in this.
Yeah. And it does a really good job of that. I mean, if you put an article into ChatGPT and you ask it, please summarize for me, it does a really good job of taking data in and summarizing with, what you really need to look at or what's important. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that one. We have another one that has come through the group chat, but let's go ahead and take a look. This is more along the lines of what we were talking about as far as like testing with A/B, but here's something that just came in for testing email subject lines and their effectiveness. How do you suggest it be fed to something generic like ChatGPT, especially given low context windows to test effectiveness when it's not a big email blast, but maybe a targeted cold email? That's a really good one, Sam. Let's go ahead and see if there's a good opportunity with that one.
I mean, my first thought is that it's all about the data, right? And so if you're testing email, the more information you can give AI, the better the output will be. So if you've tested a lot of these emails, or if you've tested at least, 3 to 5 subject lines and have a better understanding or a clear understanding of what's working, what's not working, let's start with that. And then, get a couple of more ideas and continue testing and optimizing. With marketing, we all know like it can be something so simple, right? Like a word or a time of day that you're sending an email. So it's really about testing and optimizing and learning from that information.
I know there was a case study that was done a bit ago, and I think it was Chase Bank, and all they really did was do all this testing. And what they found was that using the word unlock, basically unlock their success. So all they really had to do was change one word around, and it had a profound impact on their response rate and ultimately on their conversion rate for people to, refinance their mortgage. Not that very many people are doing that right now, but but nonetheless, it was really effective at the time. So I completely agree. And I think it was Sam. First off, congratulations, because I can tell you that so many companies and people do not do anything to segment or test their email database at all. They're just sending the same thing out to 20,000 people or what have you. So the fact that you're even asking the question and interested in figuring out how you might more effectively do that, I think already bodes well for the fact that you're on the right track. Just keep testing. We were talking earlier before this started about an organization that tests thumbnails, and they test thousands upon thousands of thumbnails in YouTube to get to the right one. It is somewhat rote, it is a little bit like boring of a task, so to speak, and you can automate that to some degree, but in many instances, they just have humans that are focused on that. And then you learn from it. And I think you're right. If you go into ChatGPT and you ask it to give you a bunch of different variations, and then the human might have to actually do the work. But anyway.
Great. Thanks so much. There was something else that was submitted earlier when we did our registration, so I'm going to move into that one. One of the questions that was sent out for you, Cristine, was, as a marketer, how do you market your research despite knowing that this profession is really stressful because one has to be willing to constantly change and adapt to a new environment?
Perfect. Yep, that's a great question. So I think the big piece is, one, embracing some of these tools, and two, doing your own research. There's so much information available to you. There are podcasts that you can listen to, cohorts that you can join so that you're collaborating and understanding how other marketers or business owners are using these tools day to day to help them with productivity, to be more efficient. So it's really embracing it, and then start using them, right? Like, a lot of these tools are free, or there's a paid version. It's very accessible, so that you can start testing and using them and iterating on them. So embracing the tools, and then just going out there and trying to learn as much as you can.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. And for you, Bret, how can I assure AI amplifies my value to company and clients and does not reduce or eliminate my value?
Well, so just be smart about how you potentially use it would be my answer. Like, we talked about the 30% and the 70%. Think about how AI can help you with that 30% of work that is where you can make it super productive, right? Like, I can take what I was doing that really was not my favorite part of my job to be doing in the first place, And I can just make it happen so quickly and efficiently and effectively too, that I can really start to devote time in other areas. If I focus some time in those other areas, then I'm creating more value for the organization. I'm creating more value for the client. If it's an agency, I think the more that we can do that, and the more we are applying those creative thinking skills, those critical thinking skills to really solve problems, as opposed to just figure out how to create 800 variations of something, which is something that AI can do very well, the better off you're going to be seen as someone that holds a lot of value in the future.
Great. Thank you for that one. And then another question that has come through is, we're seeing AI as being something that has a competitive advantage in the market. But right now, there is no single AI tool that can handle the research, curation, content creation, human view, social media, scheduling, endless. Instead, what we're seeing is businesses are stacking multiple AIs, and often they seem to be just paying more towards these services. Where specifically in marketing and business functions is AI actually a cost saver versus a cost multiplier?
I'll let you start with that one.
I mean, that's a big question. But first, I'd say, as a marketer or as an organization, understand your problem, right? So, do I need to produce more content? Okay, let's start with that. There are so many tools available, including ChatGPT, on creating more content. Do I need help with scheduling and social media? There are plenty of tools that can help you with that, both on the cost-effective side, as well as, if you're an enterprise and you have access to some of these tools and resources, there are some amazing tools out there. So it's really understanding, as a business, what's my problem and how can I have AI help solve that problem, so that then you can decide, which tool should I focus on.
Yeah. I would kind of also look at it like, at least right now, the way I'm looking at it is it's kind of a bunch of Legos. And so I've got I got my MarTech stack, and I just stack these Legos on top of each other. And
Yeah.
is it a little bit of a pain in the neck? It is a little bit, because sometimes they don't talk, the APIs aren't working or what have you. But by and large, I do at least get to choose. And so when I think about it from the perspective of I don't know, streaming platforms, sometimes I get so aggravated. Why do I have to have 12 different streaming platforms? Where is this show, kind of a thing? And that becomes frustrating, right? But in reality, at least I get the choice as to whether or not I want this one or that one or the next one. So if you think about the ones that are really critical to your business, I think like Cristine said, if it's really focused in content, then what are those areas that you need to employ AI and other marketing automation to create that stack so that you're really optimizing in that specific spot, and then move on to the next spot, and then move on to the next spot. And maybe you'll find that some of the ones that were really perfecting content, you don't actually need anymore, and you can just unplug them from the stack altogether.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Gosh, those were incredible questions. We obviously do not have time to answer everything that has come in, but we have gotten such great questions. So I will definitely continue this conversation with Bret and Cristine to be able to share those questions that came through. Thanks again to Bret and Cristine for joining us for today, and we are looking forward to staying with you on your continued journey. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Cristine and Bret. Thank you so much. And everybody have a wonderful day.